Who's here for the show? Sadie screamed to the crowd as her bandmates, including MFS, straightened up their instruments. Who is here because of the end of the world? The whole crowd cheered and applauded, with Lars commenting, Wait, what? The first song special is a request from Steven Universe, Sadie announced. The crowd continued to applaud as the shout started the music. Steven leaned to his father. This has got to bring Pearl's memories back. It's all about quitting a crummy service job, or whatever it is. Seeing how Pearl was still staring at Greg and not listening to anything else during the concert, MFS beaconed Steven to come over. Hey, one sec, Steven said to Greg, before rushing over to the purple gem. It's not enough, and without Spinel around, what else is there? Maybe we need to hit her with where it hurts. What? You know her original boss, the former love of her life. She's the reason she rebelled in the first place. Steven never realized what she meant. Rose! She's got to remember Rose, but... He then looked at his dad. If that's what it takes, Greg reluctantly agreed. When Steven gave her a firm yet sense of nod, MFS grabbed the microphone, slowly shifted into Rose. The crowd gasped in surprise. Garnet stared in awe, and Steven shut his eyes, not wanting to see the image of his biological mother. The moment Pearl met MFS's eyes, she yelped and fell backwards. The rest of the band finished it off as the last note as MFS lowered her mic. Pearl's eyes glistened at the memories of her and Spinel and Rose Quartz all coming back to her, serving Pink Diamond, the war she loved shared for Rose, the horror when she died, but also felt the joy of her freedom, the friendship of the crystal gems, the comforting love from Spinel. Instantly she glowed white and floated into the air. People gathered around and watched as the white shapeshift into Pearl's past formations. Steven almost lit up with a relieving surprise, MFS turning back to her original self, and Greg sighed in relief as Pearl came back with her current outfit and memories. Pearl! Steven cried out, giving her a hug as she landed on the ground calmly. MFS also joined in. Greg let out a sigh of relief. Man, I'm glad that's over with. Pearl looked around. Steven? MFS, what happened? Well, Steven mumbled to explain, but then this gem named Apache Tears hit us with a weapon, so Garnet doesn't remember who she is, and Apache Tears took Spinel away. The pale gem panicked. Took her away? Then a loud sound shook the ground, citizens and gems wobbling and stumbling. Confusion and fear swelling up as they looked around for the source of the crash. Buck fell off of the stage, and Sour Cream's desk fell over, the teen catching his laptop just in time. What the heck was that? Yelled MFS. As the people continued to voice their terror and bewilderment, Steven ran out of the warehouse, but he froze upon what he saw. When everyone else followed, they gasped in horror and screamed. Apache Tear's ship was destroying Beach City with white lasers, firing at the houses. Fire blazed in multiple shots, and the legs of the ship created new craters in the ground, crushing houses and trees and streets in its wake. They saw more people running around, screaming for their lives, avoiding the giant legs. Oh no, Steven whispered. Tears began to fall. This can't be happening! His horror continued to build up as he watched Bismuth, Jasper, and Lapis and Peridot try to fight against the ship. But from the sides of the ship outstretched multiple long black robotic appendages and smacked them away, sending them to crashing into rubble. She came back! MFS shouted, Pearl and Greg standing beside her, equally horrified. Lion! Steven shouted over to the big pink cat, who had hopped over him. Get Connie! We need all the help we can get! Complying, Lion roared out of the portal and leapt into it. The whole crowd saw groups of people running towards them. Most of them were injured and covered with burnt marks or scars. Even the little gems of Little Homeworld ran in panic in their eyes. We need to get out of here, Mr. Fryman yelled frantically, holding up an unconscious PD in his arms. With Ronaldo holding his fake sword out, crying Vidalia was able to help the wounded Onion, which Sour Cream ran to her. When Barbara appeared, nearly falling over with a broken arm, Sadie ran over and comforted her mother, followed by Lars' parents embracing their son. Nafuda then nodded and more families reunited. Right, evacuations are needed. Citizens of... But before anyone could move, the ship stopped, and one of the lasers pointed at the ground front covered them with a shot out, particularly a large blast. A large gorge creating itself and surrounding the abandoned warehouse, preventing anyone from escaping. Everyone screamed in terror until they saw something else. A pink shape stepped out of the ship, lightning speed, and landed almost near the edge. In the front of the frightened crowd and of Gems, the Gems slowly lifted her head, and Stephen recognized who it was. "It's Spinel," he wailed, running over to her with arms outstretched for a hug. But he saw the look in his mother's eyes, full of vengeance and hatred. In fact, she looked entirely different. She was back to her original form, except her heart-shaped buns were messy. She pulled her back arm and punched Stephen right in the chest, knocking him backwards until MFS caught him. Stephen coughed in the eyes and bewilderment, horrified. "Spinel!" "So you're the Steven Universe that my friend Apache Tears was telling me about," she growled, her voice low to make Stephen's heart sink. "We finally found you. Your region of terror is over." Spinel? Pearl called out. "What are you talking about? What happened to you?" Stephen could have sworn there was a flash of recoilation in Spinel's black pie cut-out eyes, but she shook it off. "Apache Tears told me that Steven Universe is the one who infected you, Gems, with his kindness and love. And that all ends here." Stephen's heart then felt in his throat. "What? No!" "What the heck do you mean?" MFS shouted. "Stephen's never gonna hurt anyone." "Liar!" Spinel snapped, causing Stephen, Pearl, MFS, and Greg in the crowd to gasp. Garnet looked on, not realizing what was going on. However, another shape leapt out from the ship, landed next to Spinel, turning to her face her companion. Spinel actually grinned as Apache Tears lifted her head up. Her own smirk stretched wide to her right cheek. She giggled slightly. "Hello again, dear Steven Universe. Like what you see?" She gestured to Spinel. Stephen got up. "What did you do to her?" "Nothing." Apache Tears' eyes nearly whitened with madness. "I simply wiped her from any memory of your disgusting disease you spread on her, and I saved her from you. You parasitic creature!" At once the crowd realized what was going on, and they all protested against Apache Tears and what she had done to her beloved heroines. A nervous Garnet then stood close to Pearl, MFS, and Greg, as they simply stared with an anger shock. But Stephen was petrified, Apache Tears falling without him noticing. Apache Tears' smirk warped into a scowl as she lashed out, "Shut it!" When the whole crowd fell silent, she continued, "You humans are nothing but disgusting monsters. That you have done to us Gems wrong. These poor Gems have fallen under their control, but we won't let that continue any longer." Everything was silent for a moment, but Stephen took a step forward, furious with black and white Gem, and this Gem gave up a faint light. Apache Tears wasn't fazed by his blazing anger. "Oh, what's this? You want to stop me and Spinel from rescuing these innocent Gems from your raft?" She giggled and laughed. "How stupid can you possibly get?" She then wrapped her arm around Spinel's shoulder. "If that's how it's going to be, Spinel." Spinel glanced at her. Apache Tears stretched her arm out to point at the teen. "You have the honors." Without giving anyone any time to react, Spinel punched Stephen to the side, rolling over to the edge of the gorge. He yelped in fear as he clutched onto the ledge, struggling to find some place to place his foot on. Pearl and MFS tried to help, but Spinel rushed over and stomped on Stephen's fingers. The teen cringed from the pain, not wanting to let go. "Let him fall," Apache Tears commanded her friend. Spinel complied without any hesitation, and as Stephen screamed and tumbled down the walls of the gorge, she followed suit. Greg called out to his son. Pearl and MFS tried to run over, but Apache Tears stopped them. "Don't get hasty," she told them. "This foul creature won't control you anymore." She then pulled out a random whistle and blew onto it. That's what called over her ship, and it stepped closer, until it was at the edge of the gorge, blocking their way, and she was ready to blast them. Pearl, MFS, Greg, and Garnet stood back as the crowd cowered. Apache Tears sighed. "Don't make me hurt any of you. I'm only trying to save you. Be thankful for what I'm doing." One of the appendages picked Apache Tears up, placed her inside the ship. "We have to get everyone to safety now," said Pearl, gripping her spear and taking out the frightened purple people and gems. Amethyst stared at her worried. "What about Stephen?" "He'll help Spinel. I know he can." At the bottom of the gorge, groaning in pain, Stephen then slowly opened his eyes, his vision clearly to see where he had landed, and the sky still dark, stormy gray. Strangely enough, he saw the lightning crash within the clouds, but yet no rain came. The smell of smoke and fire was so intense, he actually coughed from it despite the smoke rising to the sky far above him. He couldn't tell if it was still night or morning, but all he knew was the fact that his home was being destroyed, judging by the sounds of the destruction and screaming. Stephen slowly got up to his feet, trying to ignore the overwhelming pain from his fall. A groan came through his throat as he leaned against a rocky wall on his side, panting from his eyes closed. Soon the misery felt became stronger from the pain from his body, and he choked to be on his quiet sobs. Why? Why did all this happen? Today was supposed to be our happily ever after, but now the world's going to die. And this, Apache Tears lied to my mother, so she could hate me. Everyone says they believe in me, but now I'm so useless. Hey! Stephen jolted awake, shaking away from any other thoughts when he met his mother's gaze, her eyes still carrying the rage, and he quivered. She had usually had that look when she was protecting him, but now she was protecting her manipulator. "We aren't finished yet, Steven Universe," she snarled at him. Stephen then had his breath quickened, shaking his head. No, please no! Spinel, no! His fist slowly towards his face, sending him back to the ground, and he landed with a thump. Stephen had let out a few more gasps through his sobs. He tried to lift himself up when Spinel walked over to him. "Spinel!" Stephen cried, his body trembling. "Stop! I don't want to fight you!" Spinel scowled. "You're just saying that to trick me, but think again. I'm not that stupid." The teen then tried his best to protect himself, but without his bubble shield, but Spinel's strength was undeniably fast and strong, and he was losing breath as quick as the pink gem punched him right in the stomach, and his throat came in a wheezing scream. The deactivated Juvenator fell out of Stephen's pockets, rolling away from his reach. A white hand picked it up, and Apache Tears grinned, watching her best friend fight for her. "Isn't this just perfect?" she smirked. "This filthy parasite has lost too much touch without any of his gems to defend him. Spinel, finish him off." "No!" He fought miserably as he waited for the final blow. "This can't be happening. I've lost Spinel. I can't communicate with her. Useless." Or unless... Stephen had remembered something. A power that he didn't require was Gem's energy. Shutting his eyes, Stephen studied his power as best as he can until he felt light and the sounds faded. Floating in the bonding void, Stephen had opened his eyes and gasped what he saw was working. He looked around the empty black void until he laid his eyes on the cloudy, white bubble that formed, banging her fists on the surface. It was Spinel in her Kermit form, crying out. He could barely make out what Spinel was saying, but he swam towards the bubble and he banged the surface, catching Spinel's attention. She screamed out his name desperately, slammed her fists to get him. Wordlessly, Stephen grabbed onto the bubble, working on his remaining energy as he squeezed the side of the bubble. Suddenly, the bubble began to feel pressure and was crushing under his hands. Spinel stopped crying and kept as Stephen kept squeezing tighter and tighter until pop. The noise was so loud it broke Stephen out of his focus and found him on the ground again, panting for breath, bags under his eyes. Did it work? Did he free Spinel? Opening an eye, he saw Spinel staggering back, clutching her head, tearing at her messy-shaped hard buns, until she stopped looking at him. "Well," Apache Tears lashed at Spinel. "What are you waiting for? Kill him while you have the chance." I can't do it." Everything seemed to froze, all around the free. The sounds were the explosions, cars honking, and people screaming. Stephen felt hope flare in his chest. Apache Tears remained stunned, while her eyes boring into Spinel's, until the expression distorted into a furious scowl. Apache Tears walked over to her and shoved Spinel away, knocking her a few feet away onto the ground. "Weakling!" she roared, as she frightened the pink gem before tearing Stephen. "Fine, I'll do it myself. As quickly as lightning, Apache Tears pinned Steven to the ground, holding her rejuvenator down upon his throat. Slowly lowering it, the teen struggled and wheezed, his face turning slightly blue as the metronome gem applied pressure, grinning like a lunatic. Growing, Spinel lifted her head up, staring back at the boy. Spinel! Spinel! Steven screamed desperately, losing air. Please help me, Mom! Spinel's eyes widened. Mom? Steven gagged under Apache Tear's strength until the black and white gem was punched away by an enlarged fist, sending her a few feet away. Apache Tears got up and glowered, only to flinch in terror. Even her cute rebooted form, in the rage in Spinel's eyes, was enough to strike fear into the core of Apache Tear's gem. How dare you make me attack my own son, she growled. Steven gasped, her eyes flashing relief with joy. Spinel! Engulfed by rage, Spinel then charged over towards Apache Tears. She couldn't grab her rejuvenator in time, as Spinel knocked her down, pinning her to the gorge's wall. Friends don't lie. Spinel then was enveloped with a white glow. She grabbed Apache Tears by the leg and tossed her into the wall. The gem coughed and landed, but it was caught off as Spinel's arms stretched, grabbed her by the collar below her gem. Friends don't hurt each other. Standing in the middle, Spinel slammed her black and white gem left from right, repeatedly, from her slowly changing into her recent form. Then she turned on her legs into springs and leapt up, dragging Apache Tears with her. Nor do they make them hurt the ones they love. The still growing Spinel let go as Apache Tears was slowly falling, and she held her wrists and flattened with it in her hands and then locked it onto its target, sending Apache Tears down to the ground, away from Steven. When the fist pulled away from her, Apache Tears lay there on the ground, covered her injuries and panting, until a foot pressed onto itself on her chest. The light cleared away as from Spinel's eyes, reforming her current self. Leaning close, Spinel whispered quietly, her tone oozing off of hatred. You are not my friend. Apache Tears could only look upon horror as Spinel ripped the gemstone from her throat. After poofing the gem, Spinel let out a sigh and threw the gemstone away from her in disgust. Nearly exhausted from the fight, when she finally cooled down, Spinel then turned to Steven, who was still trying to get up. Steven, she wailed, rushing over to him and seeing her arms spread out. Steven felt a wide smile on his face and wrapped up in his arms around his mother. The two of them were laughing and crying out in relief. You're back, Steven spoke through his tears and laughter. I got you back. Spinel laughed softly, hugging him tighter and snuggling into his hair. Oh, my baby, my sweet baby. Pulling away, Spinel then planted a few kisses on her forehead and wiped the tears away with her thumb. Steven smiled. Oh, Mom, I thought I lost you. You never will, Spinel stroked her cheek lovingly. Even when she reset me 1,000 times, she could never take me away from my love. Spinel, Pearl cried, running down the slope of the gorge and happy tears flowing from her eyes. Spinel immediately stood up. Pearl! She then thrilled, embracing Pearl tightly, and they all have a few loving kisses, laughed and almost hugged Spinel tightly, and who returned it from MFest. What's happening? Garnet gently asked to no one. Still happy for the fact people around her, they laughed in reunion. Unfortunately, the moment did not last long. As soon as the black and white speckled gemstone floated towards the air, the gem reformed himself and landed on her feet. The crystal gems immediately turned their attention back to their enemy. The light faded from Apache Tears, and she looked up with eyes filled with rage. You all think you defeated me yet? Well, think again. The show's only just begun.